If we are to study the process of decline which the idea of the state has suffered in recent times, and if we are to study this process not in its exterior or consequential aspects, but rather in its deep causes and in its entire bearing, then we must take as our point of reference a general vision of history centered on the perception of a fundamental phenomenon, the phenomenon, that is, of the regression of the castes. This vision is important for its double characteristic of being at one and the same time current and traditional. It is current insofar as it corresponds to a more or less precise sensation which is today heralded in a variety of almost contemporaneous ways in the writers of various nations. The doctrine of Pareto regarding the circulation of the elites already contains this conception in ovo, and while we ourselves alluded to it through specific reference to the ancient caste system in our book Pagan Imperialism, which was at once our battle cry, it has been expounded in a more definitive and systematic form in France by René Guénon, and in Germany, albeit with a number of extremist exaggerations, by Bell. Finally, and most significantly, a similar conception has appeared today in a work animated by the squadrista spirit, and has in that work furnished the premises necessary to denounce the cowardice of the 20th century. But our argument has a second and more generic claim to currency, owing to the spiritual climate which has come both philosophically and culturally to replace the ponderous positivistic myths of yesterday. As can easily be intuited, the notion of regression of the castes has presuppositions strictly antithetical to those of the progressivistic and evolutionistic ideologies which the rationalistic Jacobin mindset has introduced, even into the sphere of science and historical methodology. This mindset has elevated to the level of an absolute truth that which is suitable at bottom and most to the situation of a parvenu, the idea that the higher derives from the lower, civilization from barbarisms, man from beast, and so forth, until it issues finally in the myths of Marxist economy and the Sovietic evangelicals of technological messianism, in part under the impetus of certain tragic experiences which have dispelled the mirages of ingenious optimism, in part on account of a true interior upheaval. Such evolutionalistic superstitions, at least in their most one-sided and pretentious aspect, have been banished today from the most conscious and revolutionary forces. The possibility therefore arises of recognizing a different, contrary conception of history, one which is new, but at the same time remote and traditional. The doctrine of the regression of the castes in its relationship with the idea of the decline of the state is surely one of the fundamental expressions of this conception of history. The fact of the matter is that, in the place of the recent materialistic and democratic myth of evolution, the greatest civilizations of the past uniformly recognized the right and the truth of the opposite conception, which we may analogically call aristocratic. This conception affirms the nobility of the origins, and it perceives in the course of recent times, rather than any kind of acquisition of truly superior values, an erosion, a corruption, and a decline. But here, so as not to give the impression that we are passing from one kind of superficial partiality to another, we must also observe that in the traditional conceptions which we have mentioned, the concept of involution almost always figures as an element of a much vaster cyclical conception. And this conception, though in a rather amateurish form and constrained by narrower and more hypothetical horizons, has today made its reappearance in the theories regarding the ascending auroral phases and the descending twilight phases of the cycle of the various civilizations, as can be seen in the work of Spengler, Frobenius, or Ligeti. This observation is not without its importance for the intention of the present writing.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.